Well, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to United Lodge of Theosophists San Diego, here for the Aquarian series. And this afternoon, the title of the presentation is Viraga, and that will be given to us by our own Shobha Sharma. For this evening, before we get started, a reading. This is from the Dhammapada, entitled Viraga Marga. The best of paths is the Eightfold Path. The best of truths are the Four Noble Ones. The best of states is that of detachment, Viraga. The best of men is the seer. This is the path. No other leads to the pure vision. Enter ye this path, so shall ye confound Mara. Treading this path, you will end your suffering. It was shown by me as soon as I learned how the thorns in the flesh are to be removed. You yourself must strive. Buddhas are but signposts. Those who enter the path and discipline themselves are released from the bondage of Mara. Impermanent are all conditioned beings. He who knows this ceases to be in the thrall of grief. This is the path of purity. Full of pain are all conditioned beings. He who knows this ceases to be in the thrall of grief. This is the path of purity. Full of pain are all conditioned beings. He who knows this ceases to be in the thrall of grief. This is the path of purity. Unsubstantial are all conditioned beings. He who knows this ceases to be in the thrall of grief. This is the path of purity. Unsubstantial are all conditioned beings. He who knows this ceases to be in the thrall of grief. This is the path of purity. He who does not rouse himself when it is time to rise, and though young and strong, is full of sloth, whose will and thought are weak, that lazy man will not find the path of wisdom. Guarding speech, controlling mind, not doing wrong with the body, a man keeps the three avenues to action clear, and thus finds the path shown by the wise. From discipline of yoga springs wisdom. From lack of it, there is loss of wisdom. Knowing this twofold path of progress and decline, let a man bend his way to the path of progress. Cut down the whole forest of desire, not single trees. Danger lurks in that forest. Having cut down trees and uprooted the weeds of desire, you are free, O bhikkhus. So long as the desire, however small, of a man for woman is not destroyed, so long his mind clings like a suckling calf to its mother. Cut out self-love if you would, an autumn locust. Then resort to the path of peace, to nirvana. The happy one has shown this. Here shall I pass the monsoon. There shall I dwell in winter and summer. This is foolish reflection. He does not consider obstacles of existence. Flood carries off a sleeping village. Death comes and carries off the man absorbed in cattle and children. He is distracted of money. Sons are no protection, nor father, nor kinsman, when one is seized by death. There is no hope from relations when death seizes one. Recognizing the significance of this, a wise and good man should straightway begin to clear the path that leads to nirvana. And so now we give you our very own Shobha Sharma. Thank you, Shobha.
Thank you, Monica. That was a long piece. Thank you so much for doing it so beautifully. Friends, today, as we watch and hear about the awful behavior of what's going on in the world, whether it be in Gaza, whether it be in Sudan, Yemen, Ukraine, or right here with the war of words. However, besides these external horrific wars, there are internal wars going on every second within ourselves. As the Bhagavad Gita so eloquently starts saying, Dharma Kshetre Kurukshetre. In other words, in the Kurukshetra field of battle of Dharma, which is sometimes loosely translated as duty, is going on every single second within ourselves. To counteract and rise above these wars, we have always had these paramitas, which are simply nothing more than virtues we need to cultivate. The paramitas have been part of the teachings of Buddhism in the Dhammapada, the voice of the silence, the light on the path, the Bhagavad Gita, as well as Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. How do they help us? They help us transform this constant warring and reach equanimity, peace, compassion, and practice true meditation. The voice of the silence in fragment 3 talks about the paramitas to help us destroy the inner wars so that external wars become extinct. So far, we have had an occasion to listen to some wonderful speakers who spoke about Dana, Sheila, Shanti, and today I will try to unravel what Viraga signifies. I shall never forget something that happened to me as a little child. Not a little child, maybe I was 8 years old, not too little. And I remember a bookshelf that existed in our house that was just weighed down with books. And it had all kinds of tomes in it. And in one side, they were all the devotional readers. And I remember looking at the yellow colored jacket of the light on the path. However, when I was young, I wasn't interested in reading any of that. But as I got older, I do remember something. And I was always struck by the first few sentences that say, before the eyes can see, they must be incapable of tears. Before the ear can hear, it must have lost its sensitiveness. And then in the voice of the silence, the same words are echoed in a poetic way. Viraga, indifference to pain or pleasure, illusion conquered, truth alone perceived. As most of us know, this remarkable book is the result of H.P. Blavatsky translating a few verses from the Book of the Golden Precepts. It is interesting to note that whether we look at Theravada Buddhism or Mahayana Buddhism, the Viraga paramita is missing or is expressed in a different manner. Theravada Buddhism names 6 paramitas, and there is no mention of Viraga as a separate paramita. When we look at Mahayana Buddhism, they mention 10 paramitas, and once again, Viraga is not named. Thich Nhat Hanh, a Vietnamese Buddhist monk, talked about the paramitas in a totally different way. And he divides them to 5 steps, leaving prajna as the final goal, making it a total of 6. His 5 steps are giving, diligence, mindful training, inclusivity, and finally meditation. And all this leads to prajna. Giving is dana. Diligence includes shanti and shila because patience and harmony requires due diligence. And then Thich Nhat Hanh talks about the need for a sangha or a community for all this, the exchange and discussion of ideas, which we are doing just now. And he says, this is the best way to practice these paramitas. The key of viraga and virya are within the mindfulness training he talks about. The need to feel the unity and balance of life with every breath one takes. Energy akin to virya. And of course, Shanti and Sheila are also there. The need to feel unity, and then the profound way of talking about the 4th and 5th paramita also leads to inclusivity, and meditation becomes dhyana, and finally leading to prajna. H.P. Blavatsky, in The Voice of the Silence, names 7 paramitas. As we all know, dana, shila, shanti, viraga, virya, dhyana, and then prajna. The mystic number 7 has always been important in theosophical parlance. We are now at the midpoint of the paramitas. Once again, let us focus on the definition that H.P. Blavatsky gives. Indifference to pain or pleasure, illusion conquered, truth alone perceived. Why are we talking about indifference? In fact, the footnote later on, after crossing Shanti's gate, talks about being prepared to get to Viraga and says, Viraga is that feeling of absolute indifference to the objective universe, to pleasure and to pain. Disgust does not express its meaning, yet it is akin to it. The early words on the first page of The Light on the Path also talks about viraga, making one initially think of a stone cold heart when it talks about incapable of tears. Is that what viraga is? We miss the whole message of these devotional books when we do this. In fact, in The Light on the Path, which was specifically targeted to a Western audience, the author mentions what readers have to do in the notes section. She says one needs to read not between the sentences, but between the words to get the true meaning. When we look at fragment 3 of The Voice of the Silence, it starts off with these questions by the great teacher. Hast thou attuned thy heart and mind to the great mind and heart of all mankind? For as the sacred river's roaring voice, whereby all nature's sounds are echoed back, so must the heart of him who in the stream would enter thrill in response to every sigh and thought of all that lives and breathes. Attuning one's mind and heart with that of all mankind was also mentioned very beautifully by the speaker who talked about the Sheela virtue some weeks back here in the Aquarian series. It also echoes Thich Nhat Hanh's words about mindfulness training and inclusivity. Without Sheela, without Dana, without Shanti, one cannot even think of entering the Viraga gate. Universal brotherhood and sisterhood need to be a part and parcel of the Strotapati. In reality, the speaker on Shanti said all these virtues can be made into one grand phrase like universal law and compassion. Attuning is mathematical, it is precise, it is Pythagoras' training for his students. It is the music of the spheres. In volume 2 of the Theosophical Articles, on page 22 of the article Psychic and Noetic Action, H.P. Blavatsky says, every human organ and cell in the latter, which he means the body, has a keyboard of its own like that of a piano, only that it emits sensations instead of sounds. Every key contains the potentiality of good or bad, of producing harmony or disharmony. Again, in the voice of the silence, talking about attuning one's mind and heart. Disciples may be likened to the strings of the soul echoing Veena, mankind unto its sounding board. The hand that sweeps it to the tuneful breath of the great world soul. The string that fails to answer neath the master's touch, in dulcet harmony with all the others, break and is cast away. So we see that Viraga is harmonious and calculated. It is stone cold only for one's own self, but is loving and giving to others. It is definitely not indifferent to others, but is indifferent and hard-hearted to one's own pain and pleasure. Hearken the words from the voice of the silence that talks about the mango. Be like the flesh to others and be like the stone to your own woes and sorrows. I'm paraphrasing it. Okay. Viraga, besides being harmony and balance as the middle principle, it also shows detachment to one's own desires and wants. In Families Anonymous, the word detachment is often paired with love when dealing with a loved one who has addiction issues. This may sound contradictory at the surface, but is really very courageous to face the loved one's addiction by releasing them with love and letting him or her work out their issues without family enabling or interfering. Substitute the addict for the lower self, which is addicted to the wiles of the desires, the senses all linked to the gunas, and detach. Release with love to let your true self shine through. Detachment is also felt when a person faces any form of acute trauma or shock in life. Neville Shute was a well-known writer in the 50s and 60s, but I think I read him in the 60s. And he started life as an aviator in England and later moved to Australia. He has written several books. One of his books was made into a movie, On the Beach, many, many, many years ago. One of the books that I read called Checkerboard is about a man who discovers that he has only 1 year to live. And he could die in a year. So after the initial horror of realizing this, he gets a sense of resignation and detachment and says, it will all be the same in 100 years. The word detachment comes several times in the Upanishads, the remarkable portion of the Vedas that deals with Jnana Kanda or section on wisdom. While the Vedas focus on rites and rituals, the Upanishads give us the ancient words of the sages and wise men about living the life. understanding why we are here. The Upanishads have several sections with different names, and they delight and inform us about the eternal questions a seeker after truth asks. The Mundaka Upanishad is famous for the lines Satyam eva jayate nanritam. Truth alone prevails, not unreality. These words became famous because Gandhiji used it as a bedrock of his daily existence. Apart from this, there is a verse here that we, as students of theosophy, are also aware of, talking about the two birds within us. So, in part 3, verse 1 of the Mundaka Upanishad, this is what is stated. Like two golden birds perched on the self-same tree, intimate friends, the ego and the self dwell in the same body. The former eats the sweet and sour fruits of the tree of life, and the latter looks on in detachment. As long as we think we are the ego, we feel attached and fall into sorrow. But realize you are the self, the Lord of life, and you will be freed from sorrow. When you realize that you are the self, supreme source of light, supreme source of love, you transcend the duality of life and enter into the unitive state. Another Upanishad called the Taittiriya Upanishad concentrates on personal fulfillment and social good, not in conflict, according to the writer Eknath Easwaran. Talking about the various sheets or layers of the human, in part 2 and verse 4, it focuses on the mental sheath, which is called the Manomaya Kosha, and then talks about the wisdom sheath, Vijnanamaya Kosha, saying, within the mental sheath made up of waves of thought, there is contained the sheath of wisdom. And a little later, wisdom means a life of selfless service. Even the gods seek spiritual wisdom. Those who attain wisdom are freed from sin and find all their selfless desires granted. The wisdom sheath is made from detachment. Two beautiful expositions of Viraga indeed. Of course, all this sounds very easy, right? But the process needs to be undertaken and worked on day by day, minute by minute, second by second. The reading from the Jewel in the Lotus about the Viraga Marga says, cut down the whole forest of desires, not single trees. Danger lurks in that forest. Having cut down trees and uprooted the weeds of desire, you are free, O bhikkhus. And then again, cut out self-love as you would an autumn lotus. Then resort to the path of peace in nirvana. The happy one has shown this. One sees from the above quotes that all these paramitas do not stand like stepping stones, but are interlinked and related. In fact, the whole of the voice of the silence gives us hints and clues and prepares us for the grand entrance of fragment 3 and the elucidation of these essential virtues for the neophyte. Meanwhile, let us look at different ways in which Viraga is explained by people in the Theosophical family. Grace F. Noak was a president of the Theosophical Society in the West Coast from 1971 to the new millennium. A doctorate well versed in Hebrew, Sanskrit, and the Kabbalah, to name a few, she insisted on directing the membership to focus on universal principles and work to unify different groups of theosophical work. In one of her publications called To Light 1,000 Lamps, she talks about the paramitas, and coming to Viraga, she reiterates what was stated earlier. As for the fourth paramita, Viraga, dispassion, non-attachment to the effects of the ups and downs of life. How difficult we find this, and yet, if in our deepest self we cherish the bodhisattva idea, the cultivation of viraga by no means condones indifference to the plight of others. Rather, it demands a wise exercise of compassion. It is interesting to note that to our knowledge, this paramita is not given in the usual Sanskrit or Pali texts. That the voice includes viraga has significance in that the fourth position is pivotal, midway in the series of 7. We are reminded here of the 7 stages of the initiatory cycle, of which the first 3 are preparatory, consisting chiefly of instruction and interior discipline. In the fourth initiation, namely viraga, the neophyte must become that which he has learned about. That is, he must identify with the inner realms of himself and of nature. If successful, he may attempt the 3 higher degrees, leading to suffering the God within to take possession of his humanity. She continues, to become equal-minded in every circumstance, in joy and pain, success and failure, is to have attained the calm of a muni, a sage. It is fully to identify with the truth that whereas all that is born carries within it the seed of its decline, the indwelling wonder, the imperishable spirit, as so eloquently chanted in the Bhagavad Gita, is deathless, unperturbed by the pairs of opposites. To achieve the stature of a sage may seem rather distant for us. However, when we give the practice of viraga a fair trial, what a release this affords from the burden of tension we needlessly inflict upon ourselves and, alas, on others. What eloquence! We look at viraga not just for the detachment, but also getting rid of illusion or maya to get to the truth. And those words of the Bhagavad Gita are seen in the 2nd chapter, one of the 2 long chapters, where Krishna says in verses 56 and 57, in the succinct translation by William Q. Judge, such a man is called a muni, when in every condition he receives each event, whether favorable or unfavorable, with an equal mind with neither likes nor dislikes, his wisdom is established. And having met good or evil, neither rejoiceth at the one, nor is cast down by the other. We cannot end this talk without talking about the understanding of viraga and the contemplation of viraga without looking at Mr. B.P. Wadia's rendition of the paramitas in the collection called Studies in the Voice of the Silence. This pamphlet was created from a series of articles he wrote for the Theosophical Movement, a magazine that still continues from the Bombay ULT. He was associated with the Bombay Lodge for many years. Before that, he was in Bangalore. And so in the Bombay Lodge, he continued as a devoted student of Theosophy. Under this collection, section 4, called The Virtuous Mind, page 17, he talks about viraga or vairagya, as it is often called in India. He talks about Dana, Shila, Shanti as a triad, and Virya, Dhyana, and Prajna as another triad. And then he says, between the two triads is the paramita of Viraga, Vairagya, without which neither can Maya, illusion, be conquered, nor can truth, Sat, be perceived. Detachment, dispassion, indifference is in more than one sense the most important of the virtues. And we are told in the Voice of the Silence, fragment 3, have mastery over thy thoughts, O striver for perfection, if thou wouldst cross its middle portal's threshold. He then talks about how the mind holds on to objects of sense, leading to desires and passions, all part of the attachments. Once one detaches, which means to detach from the lower, then only can one attach to the higher. He mentions the fact that we feel gratification because of the elemental beings that make up our desires. And that is due to the interplay of the desires, the senses, and the organs, also known as the Jnanendriyas and the Karma Endriyas. Mr. B.P. Wadia says, desire perception leads to desire action. Therefore, we are told, stern and exacting is the virtue of Viraga. If thou its path would master, thou must keep thy mind and thy perceptions far freer than before from killing action. Again, from fragment 3 of the Voice. He continues, action that is not pleasing to the Ishvara, the divine spirit in man, the thinker, is selfish, and its opposite is akin to sacrifice or yajna. And then he asks us to go to the Theosophical Glossary, where it says yajna is a sacred sacrifice. Simply put, it is the bridge that connects the sacrificer to communicate with the gods because of developing the true will power. This is what Viraga truly is, reaching the realm of Sat or truth. You start the practice of Viraga wrestling with the army of thought sensations that subtle and insidious creep unasked within thy soul's bright shrine. The critical stage of acquiring the siddhis or powers, where the mind has to be kept vacant and also steady and firm. Our thought links are binders, says Mr. B.P. Wadia, and the trick is to learn to bind them to the Supreme. How? Mr. B.P. Wadia guides us that the higher choice needs to be made, and when the resolve is made, the emptiness of the world of the senses is seen. This has to be a continuous process. We may have temporary flashes of this, but it has to be like the dripping of honey, continuous. This will lead, he says, to the conquering of illusion and seeing the truth. The bliss of the plenum is seen, and Mr. B.P. Wadia says, the symbols of the vacuum and the plenum are excellent metaphysical ideas, contemplation on which strengthens the virtue of Viraga. Verily, the virtues called the paramitas are like a 7-petaled lotus that comes from the mud and mire of our terrestrial world. But we can still rise and see the spiritual sun. Viraga in the middle is a synthesis of the first 3 and a preview of a 3 that follow. But never forget that after the development and the flowering of all these virtues like Viraga, we cannot practice these paramitas without remembering some of the words from the voice of the silence again. To live to benefit mankind is the first step. To practice the 6 glorious virtues is the second. Again, almost at the end of fragment 3, these words are echoed here. Now bend thy head and listen well, O Bodhisattva. Compassion speaks and saith, can there be bliss when all that lives must suffer? Shall thou be saved and hear the whole world cry? Which brings us back to the beginning of this presentation about inner and outer wars going on all the time. The pilgrim who is ready to go to the other shore needs to hear and heed these cries early on when he starts out to become the enlightened soul. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh gosh, such a wonderful presentation and such a beautiful composition of words of wisdom.
Thank you.
And such an insightful words of your own, Shobha.
Thank you.
The fact that you brought B.P. Waddy, I'm so glad you brought his essay in.
Mm-hmm.
It was the first time I was able to really see what these virtues were about, because I tend to see things in the circle, and when they're delivered, they always seem to be itemized or in a line. And
Right.
so when he presented it as these 2 triangles coming together, just like the symbol that we use, our theosophical symbol, I could see them again as a single virtue that are being expressed in these 3. It reminded me of that bird that sits at the center with its wings at the side. And so I'm so appreciative of B.P. Wadia in his translation and his presentation of those virtues, and especially Viraga, and you brought this up, such an important point, that it sits as, we think of the number 7 as being in the middle, but 4 is the fulcrum,
right,
the center. You could almost imagine that that's where the others almost spring from. And another interesting thing I wanted to mention too is when people NDE, our near-death experiencers, leave their bodies, they also experience a detachment. They experience their true selves for a moment, and that involves a kind of release or surrender, or it's like, I know my body's down there, but I don't feel attached to it. I know there's things going on and they're kind of curious, but I don't feel like I need to be in there. That's quite the opposite. But I'm really happy about the BP Wadia and bringing up that number 4 as the midpoint and the fulcrum of that centerpiece of 7. All right.
Thank you, Desiree.
Thank you.
I know that, of course, because of you, I thought about the mathematical side of Viraga too, and I said, Desiree brought in the fulcrum now. Good. Yes.
All the numbers are important, and they're all one number.
Yes. Yeah, it's a beautiful BP Wadia. Somehow, I always feel I need to go to him whenever I can, if it's possible.
Oh,
right?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Well, I've got Monica.
Go ahead, Monica.
Well, thank you. First of all, Shobha, this was just so magnificent.
Oh,
thank you
too
so
nice.
much. And, well, no, I don't think so. It just is so clarifying. And for this student, I think perhaps in need of some clarity. For example, when you express the difference between the Vedas and the Upanishads, I think that's a very important idea, to be clear about what does what's what's being pointed to with each section. But in terms of Viraga, I have this question. One, I think it is a little bit more clear for this student because I'm understanding now that it's considered to be the most important one. But the question is this student imagining things that it is also being the most important one, the most target that is missed in a way? And what I mean by that is, do we just read about Viraga and then, make this decision inside ourselves that we're going to have this detachment, which would seem to me to cause a sense of pretense? Or is this something that grows within us as we pursue this path? Or is it both?
Excellent question. I love the question. One of the things I need to say is that the three speakers who spoke before me, I owe a lot to them because they laid the path and I'm following it. Person who spoke on Dana, the person who spoke on Sheila, the person who spoke on Shanti, there was this thread which was stated that they're all connected and one cannot be without the other. Let me give an example. I talk about Families Anonymous. I'll talk about Alcoholics Anonymous now. They have the 12 steps. It's not like stepping stones. You can go to step 1, step 2, step 3, come back and go back to step 1, step 2, step 3. You see? So I look at the paramitas like that. They are all connected. And I remember the Shanti speaker said something so profound. They can all be condensed into one. And I thought, how profound, they're all so, and every single speaker said it in different ways. And I spent a lot of time listening again to their speeches, because when you listen to them once, you don't get everything, but it was profound for me. Each one was different, but each one echoed the same concept of connection, intermingling. Dana, look at Dana. It's a beautiful thing. You think it's giving. Giving what? Not just money, but giving time, giving effort, giving and loving. Like Thich Nhat Hanh says, it's inclusivity too, isn't it? It's compassion. Yeah. It's everything is there.
Yes.
Same thing with Sheila. You talk about balance, but how can you have balance if you don't have that love and inclusivity of all, universal brotherhood? It seems to be like they all seem to have certain aspects that need to be cultivated, yet at the same time, they all are. So your question has the answer in itself. It is both, I mean, it feels like a stepping stone, but it's also something you need to have when you start with Dana. In fact, even before Dana, remember what voice says: you live to benefit mankind. That encompasses everything, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Think about it. You don't need the paramitas if you really truly understand. I'll tell you a beautiful story about Rama that I don't know if it's made up or it's a poet's imagination. In the Tamil alphabet, the vowels, there are many vowels, long and short vowels, and each vowel has a saying attached to it. So when Rama is sitting there studying it, his brothers have all gone and finished all the vowels and they've moved on. They've learnt it. But he is still focused on the first one. It says, in Tamil, it says, Aram Seyya Virumbu, which means you need to know what your duty, your dharma is, what you need to do. And he is so focused on it. He's like, what does that mean? This is a little child Rama sitting there. So it's like that with the paramitas. If you understand one, you understand them all. So here he is, everybody's moved on, but he's still there in the first one, looking at it and saying, what does it mean? How do I do this? So I think I just love the way we hear this in the voice that the paramitas, before the paramitas, get that thing done. What is that thing? To live to benefit mankind. I mean, that does everything, right? So your question, I think, had the answer. I don't know. Did I help you? What do you think?
Boy, did you ever. Just to remind us of that one sentence, to live, to have that as a motive. I think that wipes out a lot of pretense somewhere in there. But that's such a wonderful reminder.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Shobha.
Welcome.
That's amazing.
Welcome.
Thank you, Monica. Laura, go ahead.
Well, and thinking about what you said about the virtues being one, and thinking in terms of the self, that are the virtues the qualities of the self, to, the radiation of the self. And once you, as you pointed out in your wonderful bringing together of Viraga, as you pointed out that the oh gosh, I lost the making of one. That you begin to see that you are the virtues on the inner planes of your being.
Right.
And then you mentioned Dharma.
Yes.
And so then I think, is our Dharma as a humanity to shine the virtues into every dark corner and every condition that we find ourselves in.
Right.
And that's our Dharma. So, and the other thing that in the process of reaching that, I discover that you can't see the pain of another until you become indifferent to your own.
How beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I just love it, because it doesn't tell you everything when you look at that definition, right? And that's why I love Rama's story about pondering about it. It's like, what is being said here, And no, I think I never. It's interesting. It's after listening to the three speakers that I pivoted myself to think of the paramitas not as stepping stones, but as a unified whole. They all contain, that's why I called it the 7-petaled lotus. I mean, you could give some other, symbol, some other, way of describing it. But I just thought about it. They're all interlinked. And, but after listening to the speakers, truly, it's a joy that you learn from each other. That's another thing Thich Nhat Hanh says, right? About the Sangha. He says the community. You learn from each other. What a beautiful thing that we are able to do this through this through the waves, whatever these waves are through which we are seeing each of you and talking to each of you, and the joy of learning from each other, and that I think that it's this Viraga thing has been really very moving for me, thinking about it and realizing how very difficult it is to live each one. I mean, think of Dana, think of Sheila, think of Shanti, think of, Viraga, Virya, all of them. Dhyana, all of them have so much work that needs to be done but then when you listen to what BP Wadia says, it seems so easy, right? He lays out the steps of how to do it. And even what Grace Pino, the president of the Theosophical Society, talks about. She lays it out so beautifully, but it seems easy. Oh, I think I can do it. I don't know. But still, that's why it talks about doubt and everything, how beautifully the third fragment talks about a sense of pride, doubt, fear, all these things, right? That assails the neophyte. Yeah. And still, till the end too, it keeps coming back to the question of compassion, right? The fragment 3 doesn't stop with the paramitas. It says, don't forget compassion in all this.
all this work to re-become what we already are.
Right.
Ken, you got the floor.
Yes, thank you again, Shobha, for this wonderful presentation on the paramitas. I was been puzzling for some long time about that one definition in fragment 3 in the footnote of the Voice of the Silence, where it says Viraga, it says, close not thine eyes, nor lose sight of the Dorje, Mara's arrows ever spite the man who has not reached Viraga.
Right.
Footnote there talks about that quote you said about that HPV defines it as a feeling of absolute indifference to the objective universe, to its pleasures or pain, and then adds this weird last sentence that disgust does not express its meaning yet to akin to it. So I'm thinking, how is disgust, which is about disliking something, akin to indifference to things that you like or dislike?
Yeah.
And maybe it's that unacceptable part that the world of manifested stuff is in a sense unacceptable because it's transitory and mayavic.
Right. Yeah, we need to have disgust, but this is for us, right? Yeah. Disgust. I mean, what is all this? There is a saying in Tamil that says, "This whole body is a lie. It's just a thing filled with air." It says. I mean, I'm just saying it in English. Yeah. But it's actually quite cute in Tamil, but you wouldn't even understand. That's okay. But if you spoke Tamil, you would see it. But that's what it is. It says it's a lie. This whole thing is this kaya. It's called a kaya, the body, kayam in Tamil. It says kaya me idu poyyada. Poi means false. Katraditta payyada. It says it's just filled with air. You know, I don't think anybody here speaks Tamil, so I'm okay with saying it anyway.
That's great.
I'm kidding. But it's just shows the disgust, you know, that and the Vedantins, of course, you know, reduce everything to Maya, which puts us all in a quandary because we have to live in this Maya, right?
Yes.
And so how can I dismiss it? Right? I still have to go and wash the dishes. They're waiting for me. Right? Yeah. So but I see what they mean by that. It is Maya in the true sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So one can have that a thought or a feeling of disgust and notice it and then say, okay, now I'm going to move beyond that and then go to this indifference because of the transitory nature. But yet we're operating in terms of our compassion and all that kind of stuff. We're operating in that transitory, temporary reality.
Right. Yeah. But that's the thing. That's the key, I think. And it doesn't mean we cannot have a sense of humor and cannot have fun in life and all that. But at the same time, to be aware, that's why the light on the path is so brilliant. It says, be ambitious, act like those who are ambitious, but kill out ambition. I mean, it sounds so Zen-like, you know, what is this? You know, but it's that's what it is. You know, kill out desire of life, it says.
I agree that sense of humor has to play a big role.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't be serious. Philosophy doesn't mean we are serious people.
Right? I love it. Well, thank you for that paradoxical explanation. Appreciate it. Thanks.
I think Laura has a question.
Yes, she does.
But you know, when you mention the word disgust, it's really kind of hard to think of a sense of humor in terms of that. And what comes to mind is the feeling of disgust that arises when you realize that you're being selfish, that you have a selfish thought. And to get to the point where we don't want anything that someone else doesn't have, you know, that to want something that someone else doesn't have is kind of brings out that feeling of disgust, you know, that separateness. Right. And when you become aware of that, I think that is a wonderful moment, you know, that you can then begin to desire all those things.
Right.
Yeah.
I think of the word cringe somehow.
Cringe,
Yes.
yes.
Yeah, I love that word because I'm always, there was a writer called Saul, I think it was Saul Bellow. He's a Chicago writer. He wrote a book called Dangling Man, one of his, before he wrote the big famous book that he's known for. Now I don't remember the title of that, but I remember this Dangling Man. And he would write these imaginary letters to people, constantly. And I feel that sometimes when I do something cringeworthy, it's like, oh my God, how could I do that? Because we know when we do something that is very lower self oriented. We know it. It's not that we don't, but we feel very. It's cringeworthy, isn't it? And disgust
Isn't it fun though to cringe? Maybe that's it. When the very fact that we cringe indicates something about who we really are.
Right.
Or else we wouldn't cringe or we wouldn't feel disgust.
Right.
So maybe it is to have that feeling of disgust or to cringe is a recognition of the self.
Yeah.
And listening to the self.
Listening to the self.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I wonder if it's just our own natural self that is telling us, something's not right.
Mm-hmm.
Our heart feels heavy. Maybe there's a actual physiological reaction to certain thoughts that are not, not natural, I guess.
Yeah.
Not natural nature of.
But at the same time, we may need to cultivate it too. I don't think we should be blasé enough to think that will come not naturally. We have to cultivate this feeling of cringe, disgust and all. Sometimes we don't, right? We get caught up in life, and this is why I love what Pythagoras says about self-examination. Right? What a beautiful concept, of self every day saying, what is that? There's a beautiful poem in the Jewel in the Lotus about that. I wish I could remember it. And it talks about exactly what you need to do. What are the questions you need to ask yourself? I don't remember who. It'll come to me later. We can find it if we go through it. But it talks about this self-examination and what did I do today? A teacher does that a lot. A teacher does that. After the day is done, he or she is like, oh my God, could I have done this better? Right? So did somebody else?
I also think we need to be compassionate with ourselves.
Yes, yeah.
Not overindulge ourselves with cringing.
Oh, true. That too.
That just forces us to constantly dwell on the.
Mr. Judge says, "Don't feel guilty. That's a wasted energy."
It is, and if we focus on Viraga, going back to this virtue, we also have to be unattached to what's going on in our system and to be able to observe it kind of objectively, but with compassion.
Right.
I think having compassion with yourself is, because I would like to think the higher self is having compassion with its lower self.
That's great.
Again, it's a balance, isn't it, Desiree?
It is.
It's a balance.
Where humor comes in. Okay, David, it's yours.
Okay. I was thinking you were talking about the virtues and the paramitas not being stepping stones, but they have to be kind of practiced all together. So I was thinking we could relate that to the Gita. The Gita presents all the various yogas. Right. Those aren't stepping stones either. We have to be practicing them together. So there's kind of a parallel there.
Yeah, beautiful.
Karma yoga, bhakti yoga, jnana yoga, they're all different aspects happening simultaneously.
Right. Very good. Very good point, David. Yeah. That's a nice way of looking at it.
And I don't know if you were thinking of the Bellow book, Seize the Day, maybe?
That's a good
another
one.
great book by Saul Bellow.
No. I'm thinking of another one. It'll come to me. It was
Skip. Humboldt's gift.
That's the one.
Yeah,
Humboldt's gift. Yes, yes. You're a Chicago person. I know.
Originally.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, I only read The Dangling Man, and I loved it it was many years ago. Many years ago. Yeah. Yeah. He was famous. He was famous in Chicago. Yeah. But yeah, it's a
he also, I don't know if you know that, he also had a foot in anthroposophy.
Oh, he did.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, interesting. Very interesting. Yeah. No, the writer Neville Shute, that story that I mentioned, Checkerboard. The protagonist of that story, apparently, he says was a Buddhist. So I'm wondering if Neville Shute was into Buddhism too. It's fascinating because he talks about the fact that he's not going to live any longer and he wants to do good. The story is about him going and looking for his fellow aviators. It kind of feels semi-autobiographical because he himself was an aviator in England, Neville Shute. So he talks about, and I was always wondering, there is this whole thing about detachment. And then I realized when I was reading something about it, that it was a Buddhist concept. The main character in that story, who goes around to help all his fellow, all his friends who worked with him. So it's an interesting concept. So I always wondered where the word detachment comes from, so there has a lot of shades of Viraga in it, Yeah, so.
I have to wonder, maybe you know why, and I can't remember if it's was it Mahayana that eliminates the Viraga?
I don't think they eliminate the thing is Mahayana has 10 paramitas. So if you look at, it's the Theravada that doesn't even talk about it. But you know what? Again, why should they? It's okay. It's probably hidden in the others. I don't let this get to me because, the virtues, when we postulate that the virtues can all be, collapsed into one, or Dana could have all of them, Sheila could have all, you know what I mean?
Right.
So that piece doesn't bother me. You know what I mean? So
I'm just curious. I wonder why it's not. There's a reason for it.
Probably, and even the Grace Pinnock talks about it. She says there's no mention of Viraga in the Sanskrit or Pali texts. She says that. But though the word Vairagya is used a lot in our language. I was talking to a friend 2 days ago, and she also was saying we use that word a lot in our language, but it is used more like giving up stuff, and which is detachment, which is a form of detachment. May not be completely Viraga, but it is a form of, because remember, and this is something I think the second speaker who spoke about Sheila said, is that sometimes we focus on the first phrase. In Viraga, we look at indifference to pain or pleasure, but we forget the second piece. Illusion conquered, truth alone perceived. We do the same thing with Sheila. He talked about it, that speaker. And this is the thing. It's not just detachment. It's also the fact that your illusion has gone. Like Arjuna says in the end of chapter 18, where he says, Nashto moha, which means my delusion or illusion is gone. He says that, So you need to get to that point to get to Sat, the truth, which B.P. Wadia also talks about, So we forget that. We just think Viraga is just indifference to pain or pleasure. It's more than that. So that's the beauty of these paramitas. They're all linked, and they're also very potent because H.P. Blavatsky has given them in such short sentences, right? One sentence, 1.5 sentences, right? Yeah.
Well, we've got a couple more on the board here. Jonathan, you were there first. Go ahead, please. I know you're not feeling well.
Well, yeah, but Shobha's talk got me really uplifted, so it's quite wonderful.
Thank you.
Yes.
I was wondering, I think Shankaracharya makes quite a bit out of a connection about discrimination, and you have like the crest jewel of discrimination, and there's the idea of that linkage, the kind of a twin thing of Viraga and Viveka.
Ah.
And I was wondering if you could kind of take us through how they kind of shine light on each other, if that's the case.
Yeah. First of all, I haven't studied the crest jewel like you, Jonathan, but I do know little pieces of it. But here's what I can say: that this is the beauty. Everybody talks about it. You see it in the Upanishads, right? See it in the two birds. You see it in the other Taittiriya Upanishads. So discrimination is needed before you can get to Viveka, right? That is also part of dhyana, right? Getting to that realization, so they all go hand in hand. That's what I've come to the final conclusion, that they are all connected and you cannot work on one without the other. And so Shankaracharya, of course, in the Viveka to Chudamani, he talks about everything, and this Viveka issue is so important. That knowledge, and how B.P. Wadia talks about it in the sense of the Manomaya Kosha, the sheath of the mental, transcending to the sheath of the wisdom, Jnanamaya Kosha. He talks about that. So it's a similar kind of a thing. Unless you have more to say, Jonathan. Oh, he's gone. He's not there. Okay, I don't see him.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Truth has something, I think. Yeah.
Oh, yes. Would you mind talking about the relationship between sound and color in respect to perhaps the wordplay involved in raga?
Wow.
So a raga is also, it has to do with music and perhaps just based on, without me reading anything, and it has to do with the being uncolored or the color of dye. So it's an analogy to both color and sound.
Absolutely. That whole thing about Veena, when he talks about the Veena, and one of the speakers before me, I mean, I learned a lot from my previous speakers. I have to thank them for their insight. He talked about the Veena. He said something very beautiful. He said, when you look at the Veena, you may not even know what it is. You may have never seen it. It looks like a guitar, but it seems to have spaces, mathematical spaces. So yeah, math and sound. I talked about mathematics here early on. I said it's accurate. It's precise. I mentioned that earlier. I talked about the music of the spheres too in that. So there is music and math in all these paramitas. And when you say Viraga, that's beautiful, Truth. I love the way you do this. You're a wordsmith. And I like that connection of raga. Because raga is sound, raga is color. Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, there is all that in, and look at the voice of the silence. Right in the beginning, it talks about the seven sounds, right? Right in the beginning of the first fragment, it talks about the seven sounds. Yeah, they're all intimately connected, and even from physical science, we see the connection between sound and numbers. And again, why not a connection with color? Because it's frequencies, right? Those are numbers again, frequencies. Wavelength.
Yes, well, one of the connotations, I think you mentioned it, but one of the connotations of Viraga is uncolored.
Ah,
yes.
Beautiful. Yeah,
and
uncolored. Yeah.
And also, when people get into playing music, it's like it's a world in it of itself, and so that, in a sense, what people are into is like a cymatic vibration, which is a separation, like an artificial separation, by creating their own world of vibration.
Yeah, Well, it's like artists, right? When you see Picasso's or Francis Bacon or whoever you like, to look at art, I mean, the colors, they create something within you. It's your interpretation, right? It's the same thing with music. It takes you to certain heights, and you can't even describe it. You listen to a symphony, you listen to Beethoven, Bach, Mozart, whoever you listen to, and it just does something to you. You can't even describe it, right? But there is something in that sounds, the sounds that create that state in you, right? It creates a state in you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for that. Yes, Arun? You need to unmute.
Can you hear me now? Right.
Yes, I can. Yes.
No, I attached a link for Truth, which is a scientific paper I wrote on color and sound. So I've included that in the chat section. Truth might be interested in that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
And your quotation, it might have come from Socrates. An unexamined life is not worth living.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Arun. Thank you.
Laura?
Well, you look at the paramitas in the voice of the silence. It speaks of them as a key to a portal. And we often think of going through, we open one door and then we open another. But when you talk about the paramitas as being all one and seeing them in a circle, that then we must change the nature of how we think about the portals and the keys. So wonder if you could answer to that. What are these portals? And when we apply the key to the portal, what does it open up?
First of all, what is the key? Right? What
Virtue
is the key?
itself.
Yeah.
And it's rusty most of the time, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, virtue. And the portals.
But I mean, the portals must, if the virtues are all one, then the portals also must have a unity as well.
Unity, yes, definitely. Yeah. And they're connected. The key and the portal are connected, right? The key, the virtue, opens the portal, right? But we are distinguishing between them. But the moment you are the virtue, you are in the portal, right?
Right. But the key that gets rusty needs a cleaner.
Right.
So what is the process of cleaning the key?
Well, B.P. Wadia says it beautifully when he talks about, let me see if I can find it. I thought that was beautiful. When he talks about Viraga, he says, I liked something he said there. Let me see if I can find it. He says, desire perception leads to desire action. He says, once one detaches, which means to detach from the lower, then only can one attach to the higher. So the rusty key is because, what does it say again and again in the fragment 3? Beware of fear, beware of pride, beware of, what else? I mean, there's so many. I mean, doubt. Thank you. Doubt, fear, they all are there. And it says they become like a mad elephant, right? And they consume you. So again, it's the lower, right? The lower. And I loved a phrase here, I wish I could find it. Something about when he talks about the jnana, I love that. He mentions the fact that we feel gratification because of the elemental beings that make up our desires, and that is due to the interplay between desires, the senses, and the organs, which is nothing but the indriyas, right? The two kinds of indriyas, the jnanendriyas and the karmendriyas, the ones that are the action centers and the ones that are the sensation centers, right? So we need to be able to, and again, we aren't even talking about the gunas here, but they're all interlinked here, all that. And then the nidanas, what we are born with, all those, so there is so much of work that needs to be done before you can enter the first portal, to live to benefit mankind. How do you do that? How do you do that? That sounds so easy. It isn't, And again, all the paramitas are inside. They are there within that phrase, to live to benefit mankind. And then the practice comes, right? Once you start with that. So I think, again, this is just how I'm looking at it after reading all these wonderful people, that it's all there in potential, right? It's right there. It just needs to be tapped. Sounds so easy, right? Yeah. But it's the tapping of that potential which is already there. By the time you reach fragment 3,
You talked a little bit about addiction.
Yeah.
Can you relate that again in terms of what it takes to overcome an addiction and any relation that has with it?
Well, one of the things
that we go through.
Yeah. One of the things they say in addiction, in all this, the little that I know is that you just release with love, when it comes to addiction, dealing with people with addiction. You release. I'm not talking about the person who is working with the addiction, person with the addiction. I'm talking about family, release with love. But I brought the connection with the lower self as an addict within us, right? So let's talk about that. That's the bigger addict in us, right? That lower self. So if we can release that with love, again, I remember, I think Laura said that in one of our Bhagavad Gita groups when we were talking about the gunas, that we don't hate the gunas, but we look at them objectively, right? And we release them with love, right? That's what we need to do. There is no liking or disliking of anything, Even people that seem despicable, we need to start to look at them objectively and release them with love. So this lower self, with all its craziness that we have within us, that, which is constantly there, either making a sarcastic comment, right? Or dismissing something, or getting angry, or annoyed, or irritated. It doesn't have to be a big emotion like anger. It could even be little things like this. Microaggression, right? All that, we need to be constantly vigilant. That's it. And honest. Vigilant and honest, like the Dhammapada talks about vigilance.
And that's where a sense of humor can come in, because you can laugh at it.
Correct.
Yeah, and should, but also be diligent and but not too judgmental, because I think it's I think if we come from a place of a centered place, we're less likely to make kind of foul judgments, not just on ourselves but other people, and it doesn't help us trying to develop true discretion in matters. And I was just curious about, though, that we become addicted to these things like anger or whatever the desire is. Probably one just big desire expressed in many different ways, but and based in fear, probably. But I'm wondering about the withdrawals that people might experience when they do start to go through this kind of purging process.
Of course, just like addiction creates its own withdrawal, addiction as we know it in the outer world, addiction within ourselves. Yes, of course there is withdrawal. And that's why this constant fight, to, what does it say? Kill thy desires, make them impotent, right? Look at all that. And it keeps coming again and again in the voice. Again and again. You got to root it out. It'll keep coming. And then even when you're on the path of the paramitas, they keep coming, right? Till the end. because that choice is there in the end about compassion, right at the end. Even with that sense of pride, yeah, you may forget your pride and all, but you still need to go. There's still that work that, the vigilance. That's why I love that thing on vigilance. You got to be ever mindful of that. The path is not easy. The Strotapati is the person who enters the stream, right? And then they talk about the Satkidagamin, the one who has two more. And then the Anagamin, who never comes back. It's on the other shore. So it takes forever, right? And it's not... but it's also not... I also feel this Sangha that even... everybody talks about, including Thich Nhat Hanh, that whole thing about community, being in the right community, being with the like-minded people, talking about these things, is a step also, is a help also. Not saying it solves everything, because ultimately we need to do the work, right?
We do.
Yeah, so...
so hard to become ourselves.
Of course it is. Yeah, maybe that's why we keep coming back again and again, right?
We're here to learn, and it's hard to kind of learn outside of those desires and lack of true discretion, but we're on our way.
Right.
Maybe if there's no more hands here, I'm just going to check. Monica, can you check the chat real quick?
Okay. Let's see what's going on in chat. Okay. Thank you, Arun. I've just jumped, unread message. Music and color, Arun commented. And someone, Arun, put here researchgate.net publication. That in terms of development and through music, that this is a go-to website that refers to that. Betty, to everyone, put a golden star, just beautiful.
Oh, thank you, Betty.
Namaskar, Amma. It's through an eternal friend that this presentation comes. It spoke to the heart and mind. And that's from Nunri.
Oh, okay.
Well, there's no more questions, and we're getting to the close of the hour. I just want to remind everyone that next Saturday, it'll be the Great Sifter with Barbara Huber, and we hope to see you there. So to everyone, namaste. Have a wonderful evening.
And I just would like to say thank you, Desiree, for being such a wonderful
Thank you. And I just want to add one little thing. Oh, yeah. I want to thank everybody in the Aquarian series: Desiree, Monica, Ken, Maria, Truth, of course, Jonathan, for all that you do. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Namaste, everyone. Be well and safe.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.